Before we get started with the regular meeting, we have a special recognition, and I'll call on Vice Mayor Cheatham, please.
This is the resolution of appreciation for Everett C. Williams, Jr. Whereas the City of Franklin is a member of the Southeastern Public Service Authority and is represented on the authority by a person appointed by the Governor of Virginia, and whereas Everett C. Williams, Jr. was the first gubernatorial appointee to the SPSA board for the City of Franklin, whereas his educational background, his service to his country as an Air Force pilot, 29-year career as an executive of Ford Motor Company involving product and business planning, safety and regulatory experiences, and business counseling services to small businesses uniquely prepared him for the challenges confronting CPSA over his 8-year career as a CPSA board appointee for the City of Franklin from January 1st, 2010 to December 31st, 2017. And whereas while Everett C. Williams, Jr. was appointed to the CPSA board, he served in many capacities to the CPSA organization, such as the vice chair on the executive committee, on the commercial private hauler committee, and serving the City of Franklin with his knowledge and experience while negotiating new use and support agreements between CPSA members, standard operating procedures for CPSA, and in general, by investing himself to know every operation and facility belonging to CPSA. Whereas when Everett C. Williams, Jr. was first appointed to the board, CPSA was on the brink of bankruptcy and in debt by $250 million, and his skills helped CPSA recover financially to the extent that CPSA is now debt-free and looking forward to facing the challenges of municipal solid waste and its management by the CPSA organization. And now, therefore, be it resolved, it is with the admiration and appreciation for 8 years of service to the Franklin community, the City Council says thank you for a job well done. And be it also further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread upon the minutes of this meeting of the Franklin City Council as visible evidence of the high esteem in which this council and the citizens of the City of Franklin hold Everett C. Williams, Jr., thereby forever preserving and recording its gratitude. Signed by Mayor Frank M. Rabel and attested by Randy Martin, Clerk of Council, adopted on January 22nd, 2018.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution and appreciation? Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
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 And aye. And Everett, on behalf of the city, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you've done for us, and we wish you all the best, and I guess in your third, fourth, or fifth retirement, whichever one it is at this point in time. But thank you, and I would ask members of council if you would join me as I present this to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, would you join us up here, please?
Thank you very much. Would you like to say something? Would I like to say something? We'll give you that opportunity. That'll help. It's been an exciting 8 years. Some good days and some not real good days. So it was hard work. I appreciate the faith and confidence 2008, I think it owed 250 million, I thought it was 260. Typically it was 175. Now we're debt free. We got $23 million in the bank, and our typical fee is $65. So, public health, really, deserves a lot of kudos. But thanks for being able to serve the residents of Franklin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We had two people sign up for citizens' time. First, Ronnie McClenny.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a Freedom of Information request dated today's date. Pursuant to State Open Records Act, I request access to and copies of records and documents related to the mass exodus of police and dispatcher personnel of the Franklin Police Department. The safety of our citizens and property being endangered due to the lack of officers on the street at all times is a great concern to all citizens and should be a priority of this council. The following questions should be answered at my request. How many officers do we have working the streets on 2 shifts during a 24-hour cycle? How many officers is the police department short? How many dispatchers is the police department short? Why do we have Southampton dispatchers working at the Franklin Police Department on a part-time basis? Why do we have Southampton deputies covering activities usually performed by off-duty Franklin officers? Why does the Franklin Police Department have lieutenants working the streets making overtime for the first time in the history of the police department, except with the floods in the downtown area back in a number of years ago? Why do we have 2 qualified officers working in the dispatcher's office versus the street? Are officers being punished or demoted due to speaking out when they see something being done that's not right or in violation of professional standards? Are physical and personal relationships allowed between supervisors and subordinates, such as shoulder rubs and playing with someone's hair in the squad room or the dispatch office? Is this appropriate behavior in the workplace? How much money has been collected from the drunk driving ordinance that was adopted in 2008? This subject has come up numerous times. Nothing. Did the chief of police encourage officers to sue the city for overtime and end up costing the taxpayers over $100,000 on outside counsel to defend itself against a lawsuit? As stated by Mr. Williams in a recent news article of the Tidewater News, $110,470.87. And what assurances did the city employees and retirees have that the city manager's office will not let the health insurance get canceled or almost get canceled due to procrastination on the part of his administration again this year? Is it true that his office failed to file their appropriate contracts in a timely manner last year? If speaking and no one is listening, you're talking into a void. You're just speaking and nothing comes back. Almost like the boy who cried wolf. But the wolf I've been crying about sits in this audience often, but yet goes unnoticed. If my request is denied in whole or in part, I ask that you justify all deletions by reference to specific exemption of the Act. Thank you very much. I have a copy for you if you'd like one.
Please, and thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's good. Jennifer Bernacca.
Hello. Can you hear me okay? My voice is kind of rough tonight. Okay. In reference to the derelict property code, I have read the mission and vision statements for the Downtown Franklin Association, Economic Development Group, the city, and also have talked to citizens involved in the Historic District Neighborhood Watch Group. They are all very clear as to what their goals and concerns are for the city. Synonymous words such as history, economic impact, viable downtown partnerships, and safety and security are all concerns. All of these goals play off of each other. Does it make sense to tear down your tax base? Do you know how much value rehab properties contribute to the tax base, both economically and aesthetically, and how much it will contribute to an already challenged budget? Are you aware that raising historic properties will further encourage an already declining neighborhood, which will drive away any potential for all history, economic development, viable downtown partnerships, and safety and security of the citizens to move forward? Demolition screams, we do not want these things. Let's work on getting these properties out of the vacancy vortex and moving toward what we all really want through encouraging the sale of and rehab of to others with the help from us all to make this the community we all desire to live in. You've only got one shot at this. If you pass the code, take down a bunch of houses, you may realize this is not right and you may lose an opportunity to move forward with the city. However, if you start off on the right foot and you've got nothing to lose. If you choose not to pass this code and try an alternative route first, you'll all have nothing to lose. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That was all we had. Any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go to the consent agenda. We have the minutes from the January 22nd, 2018 call meeting and the regular meeting. Any corrections or additions to those meeting minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Nays have the same opportunity.
Aye.
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 Abstain? Aye.
And aye. Motion carries. All right, we had the departmental reports that were sent to us under separate cover. Does anybody have any questions about those? Okay. If not, we'll move right along into the finance. Mr. Martin?
With regard to the finance report tonight, we have one budget amendment recommended. This is Budget Amendment 2018-09 and addresses several items. One I did want to comment on, of course, the Virginia Conservation Grant that the city was appropriated or approved for. The council adopted a resolution previously that's attached. Is included just the revenues from the grant, in the amount of $45,500. Secondly, also we have in there under revenues use of assigned fund balance in the amount of $16,550. This was to meet an obligation the city council authorized earlier in the fiscal year in collaboration with the school system to provide additional funding so that they could wrap up a capital project, the Charles Street Gym project. They were short of funds. The amount that was authorized by the council was up to, I believe it was 27,000 and change. Fortunately, we were able to get it completed with only $16,550 being necessary. We had some program income from interest earned on those funds when they were in deposit because they're required to be kept in a separate account by the state appropriating agency. And then I think some of the costs came in a little less than anticipated, but that is what that item is. And I'll be glad to answer any other questions. There's also some grant funds from charities for emergency services, and that's listed as fire protection and pass-through dollars to Hunterdale in the amount of $10,000, cumulative $5,000 each to the city fire department as well as the Hunterdale. And then we have the Educational Capital Fund appropriations listed. If you have any questions on those, I'll try to answer. But at this point, that's all I have to report tonight.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Martin as far as the budget amendment is concerned?
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of Budget Amendment 2018-09.
I have a motion. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Nays have the same opportunity.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
And aye. Budget Amendment 2018-09 passes. Thank you very much. Now we'll get into the old and new business. Mr. Martin, you want to tee up the police department?
Just, we have, the council has requested or suggested as part of your goals for the year that we try to have regular departmental reports from different departments on activities outside of the budget, the normal budgetary process when we meet with all departments. And tonight we have scheduled the police department with the chief and any designated staff to make presentation. You've received the PowerPoint that he's previously distributed. He may have some updates on some of that since that was done rather quickly right after the end of the calendar year, and I appreciate him getting it to me early. And also, he's going to comment on some of the things that the council had discussed in previous meetings with regard to crime and some of those statistics. So defer to you without further ado, Chief.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martin. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. It's a pleasure to be back with you tonight to present our annual report that you requested. It continues to be a pleasure for me to represent the men and women that work for our organization and present to you the hard work that they have done throughout the year. And as we go through this report, Mayor, if I could, there are probably about 35 slides here. In the interest of time, if I could go through this report from beginning to end, and then we will certainly be prepared to answer any questions that council might have, if that would be okay with you. And
I think I'll be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. For the year, or over the course of the year for 2017, calls for service taken from the police department total in the amount of 37,896 calls. Of those administrative calls ended up being about 31,748. Of the 37,000 calls, 6,148 of those were 911 calls. 31,223 police-related calls, 842 were Station 1 fire, 158 calls for service for Station 5 fire calls, and 121 for Station 5 rescue. Power and light, we dispatched 122 calls and 79 for public works. This is just a breakout in a graph that's representative of those calls. In communications, as you know, the police department's made up of a number of different groups that include communications, which would be inclusive of 911, uniform patrol, special operations, the detective bureau, and animal control. We started the build out of this report with communications for you. Just to give you an update on where we are with the radio system, we're at about 95% complete with the build out on the digital system. The coverage and voice as a result are improving. It's still a work in progress, but it is much better than what we had. We still have a need to replace the balance of a citywide system at some point in the future. The new generator has been ordered as of September the 29th, 2017. And the generator will run the entire building rather than just critical equipment, given what we currently had. Installation of this generator is was expected sometime mid-January, looking closer to the end of the month at this point. With our communication side, to address the staffing there, which will answer some of the questions that you just had. We're currently at a critical staffing in communications. We only have 3 full-time dispatchers on staff. At the time this report was written, we were currently contracting on a volunteer basis with the Southampton Sheriff's Office. And what that means is, having talked with Sheriff Stutz, and I am grateful for his assistance, he allowed his staff to volunteer for additional hours to work for us on a contractual basis during the month of December to get us through December. As a result of our shortages here, understand that we'd had a number of retirements throughout the year, and then as a result, and I'm going to address this on the backside of this report, some of the other difficulties and issues that we're having in terms of recruitment and retention and attracting people. Pay and health care costs are a significant issue. The current pay for our dispatchers is $6,000 less than the city of Suffolk. If you consider and build in the insurance cost in addition to that, it equates to about $12,000 in the difference. The next academy with our dispatch personnel, if we hired all 6 today that were vacant, does not run again until April. This may be something for further discussion at some point in the future if you so choose, and I welcome the discussion. To give you a graphing of where dispatch salaries fall in comparison to the Hampton Roads Group, the annual salary for our starting communications personnel is $30,887. Olive White being the closest, being $31,219. You would think that would be less than $1,000, but by the time you factor the insurance difference, you're talking about another $7,000 in net income. Uniform Patrol Division, the work that they have produced for the year, they made 192 felony arrests, 486 misdemeanor arrests, 1,315 traffic stops, 560 uniform summons were written. They wrote 1,717 reports, 65 parking violations, 159 accident reports they worked. They did 19,851 area checks. They served 33 search warrants. Overtime of just uniform patrol at the point this report was written was somewhere around 5,657 hours. That time now is well over 6,000 hours given the homicide that we had at the end of the year that came in. Understand that homicides are time consuming and they are very expensive when they happen in terms of just actual cost and man hours and resources. Mental health transports for the year was over 50. I would expect came in somewhere at the end of the year, somewhere around 70. I want you to remember that number because I'm going to refer back to it in just a minute. The mental health transports that we do, if you're not familiar with what all is involved there, they're either ECOs, which is an emergency custody order, or a TDO that follows, which is a temporary detention order. Those cases come to us that are a result of members of our community or people in the community that are found by a magistrate that are deemed to be a danger to themselves or others in one form or fashion. It could be a mental deficiency, it could be a drug addiction, or it could be a combination of medical factors and or drug-related factor. It doesn't have to be any one or the other. But those cases, although not criminal, they fall under our umbrella of responsibility. Those cases, each one take no less than 10 to 12, sometimes 14 hours to deal with those individuals. Although they have not committed any criminal violation, they are in handcuffs and chains for the entire 10 to 14 hours, however long they are with us. They are our responsibility, and so it is an excruciating process for both them and us, and quite oftentimes it goes beyond just an initial 12-hour shifts for the officers. This is a legislative issue for the Commonwealth in terms of cost. Transportation cost is an issue. Bed space is an issue. We may not have an available bed space in the Hampton Roads area, available being Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Hampton, or Newport News, and we may have to go to Stanton, Fairfax, Alexandria, or any place in the Commonwealth that a bed is available. And once that transportation order is issued, that's where we must go. Understanding that I cannot work an officer any longer than 16 hours, you can see the matriculated effects into overtime and demands on staffing just for mental health transports. Further crime statistic breakouts for the year, we had 1 homicide, 5 abductions, 4 rapes, 4 other forcible sexual offenses, 12 robberies, 9 aggravated assaults, simple assault of 174, 3 arsons, 50 burglaries, 223 larcenies. This year, during the Christmas season, we started to have a couple of break-ins downtown. It started at the Chamber of Commerce, I believe. Just before Thanksgiving, we moved resources downtown just to protect the downtown area so that we didn't get into a repeated cycle like we did have in years past where our downtown businesses were broken into. As a result, it appears that those things worked and the burglaries were in fact limited to the affected businesses in the downtown area. We had 17 larcenies from vehicles, 89 drug offenses. At the time that I completed this report, there were 71 gunshot calls. That rose to well over 100 by the end of the year. 32 weapons violations and 6 assault on law enforcement, which we're seeing increase in numbers. Let's see. All right, that was for uniform patrol. For the Detective Bureau, they made a total of 141 either combined felony or misdemeanor arrests. They served 34 search warrants on their own, issued 4 uniform summons, worked 8 sexual assaults. They worked 8 suicides, over 2,000 hours in overtime, and I've signed over, probably at this point, 100 concealed weapons permits for the year. I want to draw your attention back to the 8 suicides. When you look at the 8 suicides and the 50-plus number of mental transports for emergency custody orders and temporary detention orders, it didn't jump out at me until after I had completed this report and started looking at it and the questions that it started to bring to my mind, and those are the health and welfare of our community overall. For each suicide that we work, every suicide has to be worked just like a homicide until it's proved and determined to be a suicide, and that there is no criminal offense that is committed. Each case is referred to the medical examiner, and each of those scenes have to be processed with the same attention to detail and the same resources as any other homicide would. These are just the ones that resulted in suicides. What I don't have and didn't have time to collect, and I don't know if there's a way to track it, is the number of attempted homicides where the act wasn't completed, or they were attempted and they died in the custody of the hospital. That wouldn't become part of our record, and I have no real way of tracking that. Those 2 items give me great concern, and all of them we would see come back into play somewhere within in the community that could manifest itself in some other criminal-related behavior. But I thought it was an important statistic, and I think bears further study and attention. Drug violations and seizures, our officers, in 2016, I reassigned our resources we were participating with the FBI Safe Streets Task Force. That was a great resource to us. The FBI has been and continues to be a great partner in terms of our crime reduction efforts and significant investigations. The FBI for the last couple of years had been going through significant turnover at a leadership level, and we had gotten to a point that our investigations at a federal level had become stagnant, and what I felt where we were not as productive as we should be. It already took great time to put these cases together for the U.S. Attorney to get them into the federal system, and we were not having the success at a rate that I thought we should. We shifted gears. I reassigned personnel. It's not a place nor an assignment that you want to keep personnel immersed in for forever anyway. It was time to sort of refresh our resources and recalibrate our investigative efforts in this direction. We reassigned personnel in 2016 to the Homeland Security Task Force. That proved to be a very valuable move in terms of resources, manpower, renewal of an interest out of the U.S. Attorney's Office, and it has proven to be very beneficial for us. From a state level violations, we had 35 charges for manufacturing or selling controlled substances, 6 for distribution of marijuana, 4 possessions of use of a firearm, 2 possessions of a firearm by a convicted felon. The federal violations that we made this year were 1, conspiracy to distribute LSD, 5, distributions of LSD, 1 use of a firearm in drug trafficking crimes, and 1 felon in possession of a firearm. From a contraband and seizure perspective, this year alone, we seized 5,531 grams of cocaine with a street value of over $825,350. Keep in mind, I think it's 453.59 grams per pound. Heroin, we seized 1,113 grams with a street value of $222,600. Marijuana, we seized 3,952 grams with a street value of just under $80,000. Methamphetamine, 28.35 grams with a street value of $2,200 or so. LSD, 150 dosage units with a street value of $1,500. Prescription narcotics, over 100 dose units with a street value of $2,000, and 8 firearms. We seized 500 rounds of ammunition. We seized 2 automobiles. We seized $250,632.50 in U.S. currency. Total street value of all drugs seized this year was $1,383,400.50. The gun that you're looking at is a Kimber Special Edition. That was a weapon that we seized with a laser sight on it. That's not a $250 gun. That's over a $2,000 weapon. Just some of the drugs that were seized and how they were packaged. And the cash in that container is $1,610. 5 kilos of cocaine, that's what that looks like. 5.5 ounces of marijuana and $462 in cash. That's 1 kilo of heroin. This was a case that we were involved in where we seized in one shot $235,000 in cash and a kilogram of heroin. This case originated out of Tucson. It's still active. I'm not going to get into the details of it tonight. It's still pending in the federal system, and as we continue to work it. But it moves as fluidly as any other business that you would see, and in most cases, far more rapidly. Our canines, this year, from a detection perspective, we had 15 vehicles sniffed, 5 parcels. We were at the schools 5 times with the dog. We did 5 shipboardings and 5 shipping containers. We were in and out of the ports on a regular basis with canines. Part of the seizures related just to the dog. Dash hit on 46 grams of cocaine again this year with a street value of right at $7,000. 6 grams of heroin at $1,200 and seized $13,000 in cash. Dash has been a money-making canine. Juvenile crimes were a question at one point with the council, and we pulled together what we could for you. Felony offenses from juveniles over the course of 2017, we had 3 robberies, 5 burglaries, 1 malicious wounding, 8 grand larceny, and 1 unauthorized use. The misdemeanor
Chief,
offenses, we had 5 weapons violations. 4
Chief,
domestic.
could I interrupt you just a second? Could you
Yes, sir.
clarify the age grouping that the state
Sir.
uses? if you
Yes,
don't
sir.
mind?
For juvenile crimes, it's below the age of 18.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Martin?
That's it. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
5 weapons violations, 4 domestic assaults, 4 simple assaults, 1 threaten a school employee, 2 petty larceny, 3 vandalism or destroy private property, 2 disorderly conduct, and 6 trespass, for a total of 46. 2016, looking at, all you have to do is touch this thing. Felony offenses, armed robbery 1 forgery, receiving stolen goods in amount greater than $200, 1. Misdemeanor offenses, domestic assault, 2. 1 simple assault, 5 petty larceny, 2 vandalism, destroy property, 1 trespass, 1 possess alcohol, and for a total of 15. 2015 offenses, 8 burglaries, 1 grand larceny, 1 receiving stolen goods greater than $200, 1 eluding police. Misdemeanor offenses, 6 weapons violations, 1 simple assault, 1 obstruct justice or resist arrest, 1 disorderly conduct, 13 petty larceny, vandalism, destruction of property 2, trespassing 1, for a total of 36. Animal control, calls for service for the year was 1,322. 1 animal cruelty, 142 stray dogs or cats collected, 3 bites. We had 125 owner release, 126 were euthanized, 39 were returned to owners, 7 died in the shelter, and 8 uniform summons were issued. Now, moving on to recruitment and retention for police. As you know, we're authorized a sworn strength of 30 personnel. Of those 30 personnel, we currently have 5 vacancies. 2 additional officers are currently in the academy, and 2 officers are assigned to dispatch for obvious reasons, as for what you saw, to backfill the staffing. We have 6 dispatch vacancies. We have 1 animal control that is full-time, and I do not have a part-time animal control person. Therefore, when our full-time animal control officer is out, it is incumbent and becomes a responsibility of the police officers to clean the shelter and take care of the animals. We're currently losing personnel at an alarming rate. We have lost long-term employees in animal control, dispatch, and police due to lack of benefits and the extreme cost of health insurance. We are no longer able to compete with surrounding jurisdictions in the Hampton Roads area in order to hire, train, and retain personnel. We're at a critical juncture, and without immediate intervention, we need to look at the possibility of cutting crucial public safety resources. And I'll give you an example with animal control and the loss of Roy Richards. Roy was a 20-year employee, had served the city faithfully and honorably for that entire period of time. Isle of Wight County recruited him, or attempted to recruit him, several years ago in true fashion, and due to Roy's just his character and his loyal nature, he stayed. A couple years later, they came back. This time, they were higher powers to be in play within the decision-making process at Isle of Wight County. They increased his salary, I would venture to guess, by $5,000. The difference in his insurance was $500 a month, $6,000 a year. That's $11,000. Gave him a take-home vehicle, didn't require relocation. He's doing the same job. They offered him, in terms of vacation, 20 years equivalent of having been with Isle of Wight for 20 years the day that he started there. So it was tough to lose Roy. We certainly miss him. He did a fantastic job. But that is one example of many in which we're seeing. As we work through this and take a look at insurance, we did an analysis on the insurance costs across Hampton Roads. The cost of insurance is effectively the same within the Hampton Roads region, for which each city and municipality pays for the insurance overall. What is strikingly different is the difference in what the municipalities pay versus what the employees pay in each municipality. For example, you'll see for a top-tier family plan, and we might not be comparing exact apples to apples and oranges to oranges here, given the fact that we no longer have the Blue Cross Blue Shield 250 plan. We only have a $500 or a $1,000 deductible. Many of these cities and localities still have the 250 as an option, so that could be built into these numbers. But you'll see that just for a family plan, and these are top-tier family plans, it would cost an employee in Portsmouth $517, state police $438, $659 for the city of Norfolk. Chesapeake, an employee is paying $430. Isle of Wight is $543. Virginia Beach is $656. Newport News is $461. The city of Franklin, we are $978.80. There's 40 cents difference between what we pay and what the city pays for insurance. Southampton County is $711. Keep in mind that our starting salary, being what it is, our entry-level salary is $44,044 roughly. If an individual should select the top-tier insurance plan, the total monthly premium cost would be $1,958, of which the officer pays $978.80, and the city would pay $979.20. Using the city of Chesapeake as a comparative, Franklin is higher salary-wise. Chesapeake's entry-level police officer starts at $42,396. If the officer were to also select Chesapeake's top-tier family plan, the total monthly premium cost would be $1,903.88, of which the officer would pay $430.24, and the city would pay $1,473.64. As a result, even though Franklin's salary is nearly $1,700 more, the officer's net take-home pay is $4,935.60 more, starting with the city of Chesapeake. Lowest tiered family plan, you see the numbers. Virginia State Police is considerably lower, $163. One thing that we need to be acutely aware of is now that the state has gone to a transfer, they are transferring certified applicants into their organization now without having to go through a full academy. I know it is going to impact us. It already is, and I've already had questions and interest from existing personnel that we have in terms of lateral entry into the state. Isle of Wight is $320.25, $341 for Virginia Beach, $246 for Newport News, and the lowest tier for a Franklin employee is $801.73. These are mortgage costs. Top tier employees only, City of Franklin, $145, $107 for Southampton. Newport News is $169, $104 for Virginia Beach, $94 for Isle of Wight, and the list goes on. Lowest tier employee, which would be the 1,000 deductible plan for us, costs an employee only $105 a month. Recruitment and retention, or recruitment for the year 2017, total police applicants received for police officer was 29. Of those 29, 24 were male, 4 were female, 15 were white male, 1 white female, 9 black males, 3 black females, and 1 female other, which may have been Hispanic or other. 2016 applicants, we only had 32 applicants total for the year. 22 of those were male, 10 were female, 17 white female, 17 white male, 6 white female, 5 black males, 4 black females. 2015, 33 applicants, 29 of those were male, 5 female, 19 white female, 3 white female, 7 black male, 2 black females, and 2 male others. Of the communications applicants, applications received were 29, 5 male, 24 female, 3 white males, 16 white females, 2 black male, 7 black females, and 1 female others. 2016, we only had 5 applicants, 0 male, 3 white females, 0 black males, and 2 black females. 2015, 23 applications received, 4 male, 19 female, 3 white males, 8 white females, 1 black male, 11 black females, and 1 female other. Our recruitment efforts, we have done everything under the sun that we know of to attempt to attract people to the city and to these jobs specifically. We've attended every job fair that's been in the area. They produce little to nothing. What we have found some success in has been the use of social media. We are active with the Virginia Employment Commission. We're advertising on Police One. Our Facebook page, our web page is active. We're advertising on the local radio now. And we're currently active in the Virginia Values Veterans Initiative through the Governor's Office, thanks to the Vice Mayor bringing that to our attention. Our current neighborhood watches, we have Old Town Neighborhood Watch, we have the Berkeley Neighborhood Watch, North Woods Neighborhood Watch, and the Holly Knoll Neighborhood Watch. And some of those folks are with us tonight, and we certainly appreciate those people that participate in those neighborhood watch groups. They are truly the stakeholders in our community. They're very important. They've taken a very active role in their neighborhoods, their community. It shows in the numbers when you look at the crime mapping and what is involved. They are very well organized. They communicate very well together. They take care of each other in the absence of as they are on vacation or in communication with us, and it works very well. The FBI is going to a new model from community policing now to what's considered to be intelligence-based policing. You will never convince me that intelligence-based policing will work absent good community policing and relationship development with members of the community. We're very fortunate and thankful for them. We also have different relationships, very good relationships, very strong relationships with the south side of the city as well. Different structure, different means of communication, but just as effective. And we are certainly grateful for their relationships also. Mr. Mayor, that concludes what I have to present for the council, and we'll be glad to entertain any questions that you might have.
Okay. Now is our time. So if you have some questions for the chief, please ask. I'll start it off. In looking at the 30 or so average applicants you've had over the last 3 years, on average, 30, I think. How many of them really are qualified, and do you hire? On
Maybe
average?
one.
One?
If we can get one, we have been lucky. Understand that there's two different processes. There's a different process for communications. There's a different process for a police applicant. And for a police applicant, it starts with a written examination that's a standardized test. It is used throughout our profession. It's a pretty common test. They have to be able to pass that, number one. They have to be able to demonstrate that they can simply read, write, and do very basic arithmetic. From there, they move into a physical agility, and they have to pass one to go to the next. From there, they go to a physical agility test. It is the Department of Criminal Justice's standardized physical fitness test. If they can't pass that, they're knocked out of the process. From there, they go to an interview that is a panel that we assemble. They get through the panel, then they move into a PEP test, which measures. It's an instrument that we use that measures their values in terms of theft from the workplace, tardiness, honesty, loyalty, integrity, those sorts of things. We take a look at that. That's not a pass or fail. It comes back with a raw score and an assessment of those particular values. From there, we then do there's a pre-polygraph questionnaire and examination. That's about a 500 question document. What we didn't already know by the time we get there, if there are any issues, that is a very revealing instrument. But they have to get through it. If they don't, then they're out of the process. From there, we start a very intensive background process, and again, we look at we look at references, resources, employment history. We look at their financial history. We certainly don't want police officers that aren't paying their bills or financially sound. We don't look for millionaires, certainly, but we look for people that are honest. We don't want people that are going to come to your home and already have a report generated for you for what's missing before you get home, and they tell you what's missing because they already know. We have not had that. We do not want that, and I will not accept anything less in terms of a standard. I've been criticized for being too selective, too picky, but I've had zero problems in terms of behavioral issues, disciplinary issues. I've not had anybody steal from a homeowner. I've not had anybody lie in court. We've not had any of those sorts of behavioral or disciplinary problems. And when you have disciplinary problems, they cost money, and they cost a lot of it in terms of man hours, legal fees, et cetera. On the communication side, in addition to the testing and the panel, they go through the same background, they go through the same polygraph. The only thing or one of the things that is different is they have to take a hearing test. And being a dispatcher is not simply sitting at a telephone serving as a switchboard operator. The technology that they have to know and be able to utilize and put in the call description and who they're talking to and what's going on when somebody is screaming, yelling, cussing, carrying on, whatever the case may be, is a unique application, and it takes unique personalities all its own. It's not as simple as it once was.
So really, I mean, it's a very objective type criteria that y'all are going through. I'm still surprised, I guess, that we only get 1 out of 30 on average that is able to get through those types of testing.
The generation that we have that applying, they are involved. When you look at some of the behaviors in terms of drug use, whether it's drug use or just, I'm not going to get into it in front of council, but absolute bizarre behaviors, you would think I was making it up. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I'm sure. Okay. All right. Somebody else, I know y'all have questions.
Yes. Chief Hodgson, I would like for you to go back to the example that you gave of Chesapeake, the top tier, and Franklin, the top tier there, because what concerns me is the difference in the pay scale. I know the insurance is practically the same, but the cities pay sort of different. My question is, do you have any solutions to that problem? Basically, because if Chesapeake's top tier is 42,000, Franklin is 44, but the difference is basically, as what I was seeing from your report as I researched it, the individual from Chesapeake, the officer, saves more money than officers from Franklin. If you could elaborate on that.
Well, I think the numbers speak for themselves. You look at the cost of insurance, and you look at what the city of Chesapeake's paying and what the city of Franklin's paying, and when you look at a $500 disparity per month, people aren't going to stay for that.
No.
You're talking about minimum $6,000 a year, minimum.
Right. And when I was in a workshop in Richmond, you mentioned the state police. They're taking officers now, if I can coin it that way, from localities basically where they don't have to go through the academy anymore. So
Well, they have to go through an academy, but it is much abbreviated.
Right.
Yes, you're
Right.
right. You're on the right track.
Right. So basically, the thing that concerns me, Mr. Mayor, is basically, I feel we need to do a workshop on this and see what we can do to change that situation, because we have officers leaving, we have a shortage and so forth. Something has to be done about this. And I think if we have a workshop before the next meeting to look at a possibility with the city manager and the finance of what we can do, how we can address this, because insurance is an issue with all localities. And not only does Franklin have this problem, there are other individuals who have the same problem, but we have to govern ourselves accordingly and make sure that we are in tune and successful.
I think one of the key things is finding out what our insurance is going to do this year.
Yes.
From a rate increase and where we're going to be. over the last 2 years, based on projections, we've had a 40% increase
Yes.
in 2 years based on our experience rating. That's a well above what the national average is. However, we do have an aging workforce. We've had some upsets in that, as have others.
Sure.
So but we do need to deal with it, but we've got to find out what those costs are going to be, and then come up with a plan. But it can't be, in my opinion, it can't be just for the police department. It's got to be across the board. We can't, if we're gonna make some changes, we need to be making changes for all of our employees, and with all due respect, Chief.
Well, I would dare to say I only represent the police department.
I understand.
But I would assume that it affects every employee in the city.
It has to, with a 40%
And
increase.
every department head
Yes.
should be here talking about it.
I agree.
Right,
And-
right.
and-
Well, if I may say, you're correct, Mr. Mayor. Basically, that was the next thing I was going to say. Because of the insurance, the rate has risen, it affects all of our employees. So we need to come up with a plan to help all of our employees, because it's going to be a drastic situation if we don't. Very drastic.
It
One thing
is.
to consider, Mayor, if I may, sir, is with each of these positions for the police officers, you're talking about an 18-month process in terms of from before they're hired to getting them to a deployable level on the street. It takes us about 6 months from the time we advertise to go through a selection process to get all the testing, the backgrounds, and everything done to get them vetted as they come in. Then they'll spend over 18 weeks or so in the academy. Then they come back to us. There's another 3 months in field training. You're talking about a year and a half per position. We're at a third of our operational strength, below our operational strength. But what is more concerning to me, and it should be as concerning to you, I hope, is where we are at the communications levels. If those phones are not answered, nothing moves. I can't have a policeman answer a phone, hang it up, respond to the call, come back and sit for the next call. We lose whatever crime prevention capabilities we have left are gone. And we are at a critical juncture with emergency communications. The sheriff's office in Southampton has done, bless their heart, and I appreciate everything Sheriff Stutz has done, but he's done. There's no more there. This is not a mutual aid issue. Mutual aid exists in the event of natural disasters, when we have overwhelming crimes, active terrorism, school shootings, workplace shootings, those sorts of things, floods. I have no problems getting, whether they're 911 operators here or police officers here. These are basic services that this city that we are responsible for, that you hold me responsible for. If you're going to hold me responsible for it and you expect me to do it, then I need the resources to be able to do that. The one thing I've done, you saw the call list and the volume. We provide services to the fire, to the power and light, to public works. If I have to go down into their personnel pool, to select people to get them, if I can get them vetted, trained, and they still have to go through the same required background to get them into the center itself because of CJIS requirements from state police or the FBI.
Are other areas having problem with the communication side? I know everybody's having problems with the officer side. Every
Police
city,
officers
every
are a
city,
nationwide
every
issue.
city
Nationwide.
in Hampton Roads is down, and I know that, but I don't know nobody says a whole lot about the communication side, so I'm asking that question.
Police, as we know, is a nationwide issue now, and it has been for a number of years. We're seeing police departments pay upwards of $50,000 signing bonuses now throughout the eastern part of the country. Communications, I don't know if you remember, but about, it was probably a year or so ago, that Virginia Beach, the media did a segment on their communications division where they were so short. And they have different level of call takers versus communications people. But again, our communications section is so small. You're only talking about 10 people. And when you have 2 or 3 retire, and you can't fill them. And then you have others because of either the work strain that they have to pick up and the hours that they have to work without the days off. They still have families, and most of the people assigned to communications are moms. They're mothers. They have small children typically, and those are the ones that we've lost. They weren't there for their families to put the kids on the bus in the morning because they work shift work. They're not there at school functions. The insurance is outrageous. And so what we're finding is our surrounding neighbors, they take advantage, they capitalize on that. And then they take our very best people. And
Well,
that's
thanks for that. Like I said, that's one that
Yeah.
escapes me because I don't see a whole lot about it. Other questions? Yeah.
The currency that's seized, what happens to the currency?
I'm sorry.
The money that's seized in drug busts and stuff, what happens to those funds?
It is split by the court, and everybody that participates gets a percentage. And depending on where you are, or how much assets you
Is
had,
that allocated back to the city or to the police department's budget?
to the police department, and it can only be used for drug-related matters. That can be equipment, it can be,
Overtime, so forth?
No.
Or just totally equipment?
it can be related to training, equipment. There's a list of criteria.
I'm just looking for funds to,
Oh, I
for the
understand.
cause, that's all.
Yeah. And we seize everything that we can legally seize. We will take the gold right out of your mouth.
Let that be a warning to everybody.
That's a good one.
What other questions?
I was trying to get let my colleagues ask their questions, and I thank you for making your presentation tonight. I would ask for time's case that if you could kind of keep your answers to my questions a little shorter, more direct, I'd appreciate it, because we've been on this issue now for over 45 minutes, and you gave,
What's your question?
I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm coming. Let's go with the first one. Piggybacking on my colleague's question, he asked, what did you do with the seizure money? And you said it's divided. What is the split?
It depends.
What determines the split?
I just answered that for Councilman Cutchins.
Well, I
It
must
depends
have
on
didn't
the
hear.
agencies involved.
Okay,
Depends
so
on-
for instance, give us a hypothetical scenario. You seized $50,000 at a drug bust, and it included the DEA. How does the split go?
I don't operate in hypotheticals, Mr. McLemore. I'll be glad to answer anything that I
then,
can factually.
Well, I would like it,
And
how
that
much
is
has the
determined, if they're federal seizures, it's determined out of the U.S. Attorney's Office.
What I'd like to know is how much of the splits has the Franklin Police Department received out of the total that you said was seized?
I don't have that number tonight.
Okay, so you don't know how much money you've gotten out of the number that you gave us?
Well, we wouldn't get anything yet for most of this. It takes quite a while. They got to go through the
It's a
judicial
process.
process on like vehicles, and they got to be convicted, and there's a lot of factors that, so it's usually well in arrears by my experience.
Okay, again, I'm looking for some specifics. Let me ask you a question, Chief Hardison. How long have you been with the Franklin Police Department?
13 and a half years.
13 and a half years. Had you been a chief prior to joining the Franklin Police Department?
I have.
Which city?
Town of Smithfield.
Okay. And how long were you the chief there?
I was an interim for a year.
Interim. And the reason I'm asking this is you used a phrase that I'm very supportive of, community policing. Would you tell me, in your opinion, what does community policing involve?
Well, I think that's a rhetorical question, but certainly it involves the community. We are very involved and engaged in the community, and we have been since the day I arrived here.
Okay. Thank you. How many of your officers are, from what you were saying, I think you're short 9 officers, and you said your load is supposed to be 30. So would that say you have 21 officers?
Yes.
Okay. And out of the 21 officers you have, how many are residents of Franklin?
I don't have that information in front of me.
A guesstimation?
I'm not going to guess for you, Mr. McLemore. We'll be
I would-
glad to
I would
provide that
contend-
information.
Well, you answered it. I would contend that, my opinion, community policing involves having police officers who not only live in the community, but are familiar with the community. And this helps in having a rapport when it comes to knowing the people in the community, so that people will be more open with the police. If they know them, they have a rapport. So, do you know if any of your officers reside in the city of Franklin?
Of course.
But you don't have an idea how many? Do you know if any of your officers were born here in Franklin?
We have birth certificates for every single one of them.
Where I'm going at is, we've got a report tonight, in my opinion, and I don't know who said what difference it makes, but we've been having a lot of crime in our city lately.
A lot
And
of it out of
people-
Ward 3, Mr. McLemore.
I agree. And
Your
even,
ward.
who's asking the questions here?
I didn't ask a question. I assume you are.
He just
My
responded.
thing is, look, and I didn't interrupt you, I've been talking maybe 5 minutes and asking questions. You've been up there almost an hour. Now, the report that you gave would have been very typical for but when we do budgets and you come before us and you give reports and your stats and all of these things. I heard very little regarding to what we're doing in regards to the crime that we're having in Franklin. Now, I'm asking these questions because the newspaper asked me what did I think was the reason for the crime, and I
Do we
should-
have a question here, Mr. Mayor?
well, when I asked the question, you didn't answer it. I asked, the questions was, did you have any officers who were born here in Franklin? You couldn't tell me that. You said something about you collect birth certificates. And the reason I asked the question again is because my goal.
I'm not here to be berated, Mr. McLemore. If
I'm
you
not
have a
trying to
question,
berate
ask
you.
it.
Look, this is our opportunity to ask the police department questions. Now, if you
Then
continue.
ask your question.
If you continue to just, I asked you to answer them simple. You can say yes, no, or give me a number, or say you don't have it.
Mr. Mayor, I think you'd be better served if Mr. McLemore went by and visited.
Yeah,
the
why
chief.
don't
No,
we?
well, first of all, we don't have the authority to question the department heads. We only have 2 employees that work with us. Now, I tried to ask about crime from this council, and let's discuss crime prior to the homicide that occurred in our city. And my colleagues, and for the audience, and for the people at home, they said they didn't want to discuss it without your presence. Now, you are here. I would like to address some of this crime that we've been having, particularly in Ward 3. I'm of the impression that it is the duty of the police department to protect and serve our community. Now,
We're supposed to be asking questions, not editorializing, so if you've got something to ask him, please ask him. Okay? Please.
have you made any arrest in the homicide that has happened in Franklin?
We do not discuss
I
open
just
and
asked yes or
active
no.
investigations.
Yes or no?
I just answered your question.
Which was not an answer.
We-
Have there been any arrests made in regards to the 2 shootings was done in my ward?
Mr. Mayor, it is typical
Yes.
practice for us as a police agency. We do not engage, nor do we discuss active and pending investigations that are underway.
And nor should
The
you.
other thing that I would like to say is that when we are in the course, we are in the field, I have officers in the field that are working investigations, particularly shootings or relative to homicides. If council has an interest, and there's certainly nothing wrong with having an interest and wanting to know what is going on, I would ask that they not approach our officers in the field, particularly if we've just had a known shooting. That is not the place to discuss it. It's not the place to talk about it. It creates a safety issue for our officer. It also pulls them off task and distracts them from their attention to detail for the evidence collection, and it slows the entire process down. And Mr. McLemore, I would appreciate you not approaching our personnel in the field anymore under those very conditions.
I would, let me make a suggestion. I think under the circumstances, I mean, if we're going to stay with the report. However, I think if you've got some specific questions that you'd like to talk with the chief, I think the city manager can arrange a meeting for the two of y'all to sit down
Actually,
and have
Mr. Mayor,
that
I would like
discussion.
my questions to go on the record for answers on the record. And going back to the report, what are the shipboardings you referred to?
Out of the port,
What is Franklin Police Department doing at the ports?
we're part of the Homeland Security Initiative.
Okay, you would think with us having the shortage of officers that we have, we still have officers to commit out of the city?
Absolutely.
It's part of the HSI.
It's reciprocal. We
return-
receive help by giving help.
The return on that is over 100-fold.
I'm going to say this, and I'm going to leave it alone, because it's obvious you have some supporters here tonight, and you're doing a wonderful job in the opinion of some of my colleagues. But I will contend this. I think that, and I have talked to officers who have been and worked in the Franklin Police Department, and what I'm hearing is like any other structure, it all starts at the top. When we are concerned with what's going on in the school systems, we talk about the superintendents or the school board. When we talk about the city issues, we have to take responsibility to these citizens as to the growth of this city. And anything happens in this city, we should be held responsible as the leaders of this city. I would contend if we're having issues with our police department, whether it's in retention or solving of crimes or anything else, we need to look at the leadership of the police department. And what I've been told by several police officers is the problems that we are having with retention. While I do recognize that we do have a insurance differential with some of the other cities, you did also acknowledge that our officers are paid more than a lot of cities. Our starting salary for our police officers in Franklin is higher than the starting salary for state police officers in the state of Virginia. Our starting salary for Franklin police officers is higher than the starting salary for New York City police officers, who have a lot more crime to contend with. So I realize that you have issues with financing, and one of my questions is, who do you think is responsible for closing this gap so that you have what you need? Or is that a simple question? Who
That's
should
a
the city?
responsibility of the city manager to prepare a budget,
I
present
agree.
it to the city council.
I
and I'll
agree,
be
but I
glad.
asked him.
I'll be glad to, well, he is an employee of the city manager, and I will be glad to meet with you and discuss any aspects of this, and we'll go from there.
In some, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Several times we've had discussions with you over the last 8-9 years I've been on council.
Yes, sir.
And we've tried to meet those needs. But I don't really, maybe you can help refresh my memory. Have we ever been fully staffed?
One time,
One time.
for a very short period
So I
of
guess
time.
my question is, what are we doing? I mean, it's more than just a money issue. Because we've met those needs in the past, but we have a hard time getting to full staffing.
Right.
So what are we going to do different? What can we do different to recruit people, maybe from that have the integrity and the honesty that we need? I mean, there are bound to be people out there that have that.
Sure,
But
sure
if we've met those needs in the past and we haven't been able to get the full speed, what's going to be different this time?
Well, what has to be different, it's a good question, and what has to be different is when we met those needs, the people came. But we didn't keep up with those needs. There was no continuum to sustain it. And what we saw was a very active interest, particularly when we made those significant and drastic changes. They were good things, and they produced good things. But it peaked very quickly, and when it was recognized that it was unsustainable, then it dropped off, and there became an attrition rate that becomes 1, that becomes 2, that becomes 3, so on. And again, keep in mind, as you have 1, 2, 3, 4, however many vacancies, the time to replace is 18 months. So it doesn't happen like that, and we don't operate in a vacuum. And we're not competing with, we're competing with different governments. We're not competing with different businesses and different trades and different things. It's the overall, and one of the first things that people are asking us now that are calling, that are interested in potential application, and they're talking to Sergeant Halverson, is tell me about your health insurance and the cost. And that's where it has all, you know, that has been a central, common, and consistent theme in what we're seeing in the attempts to recruit. The job fairs that we're going to, we're not having the interest. And policing, our profession has taken a hit undoubtedly over the past 5 years. And it's been a tough one. So, and it is very competitive. These folks that are here, you talk about community policing, Mr. McLemore, and I agree with a lot of the things in terms of community policing you say, but every one of them are volunteers. They're here because they choose to be. Not a single one of them are here because they have to be. There is no contractual obligation in terms of like a military contract. They choose to be here. They choose to make this their home to the ability to the extent that they can. My black police officers that I recruit that come here that have birth certificates that say Southampton Memorial Hospital, people come in and they threaten to kill him. He can't get his hair cut here. They cuss him, they spit on him, and they kick the windows out of his police car in the street. And so that's the risk associated with this job and with working in this city is as high as it is in any other Hampton Roads municipality. So, back to your question, we have to be able to compete. And I think that is it.
Okay.
And it's a total, it's a conglomeration of all those things put together.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I can say this for the record. Number one, I know City Council worked with the police department before and as you said, met the financial obligations, but this is a different time. Now the insurance is going up. It's a different situation that we have to work with. It's a total different picture now that we have to address. And if we don't address that, we're going to be in trouble. And the third thing, community policing, I can go and represent police come, the officers come through, they come by your house, they talk to you, they work all the wards, they're on the scene, and this is the only department that their lives are on the line every time they walk out of the house.
Great.
And we need to be behind them.
All right, thank you. I think, Chief, thank you for the report. We look forward to working with you to try to find a workable solution to this. I mean, we have to find a workable solution.
Agreed, sir. And make no mistake, we are grateful for everything that council has done. This council has been exceptional in terms of your interest, your commitment to our organization, and you've done remarkable things. And we appreciate that, and we're grateful. This was simply the report that was asked for. I was asked to present a report. I compiled what I believe to be accurate current data for you so that you can make whatever decisions you make to the best of your ability. And that is it.
And thank you and your officers.
You're welcome, sir.
May I just say thank you, Chief, for the report. It was a fine report. I've seen them before. We are increasing in crime. That's the nature of the game. And I know your officers are down, but we're going to try to work together and see what we can do. I know you're visible in the community. I appreciate that. Appreciate your calls when snow is having an interest. And I just appreciate you, sir.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for the fine
You're
job.
welcome. Just please keep in mind, I just want to leave with you the status of our communications section.
Pardon?
I just want to leave with you the status of our communication division. That is a critical issue.
And I must say, until this report, that's the first I heard that our communications had fallen off.
Yeah.
I knew our officers were down, but not our communication officers.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I think they were down the last time you didn't you mention that before?
Not in the extremely.
No, ma'am.
Not in critical nature, but now.
Okay.
Thank you again, Chief. Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item is the derelict properties ordinance. We did have two people that signed up for that on the agenda section, Bobby Tyler and Tommy Council. I will remind each of you that that's limited to 5 minutes, and you may speak only once. So Bobby, I think you were first on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. And, you know, it's hard to follow a report like the chief just gave us, but I've said for many, many, many years, a lot of our issues are systemic. I think this derelict building issue is a systemic issue as well. And it's also a money issue. That's the bottom line. And when you don't have growth, constant overturning and moving forward, we are living in some of the effects of that. So I'm going to talk about the derelict building, if you don't mind now. About the year 2004, the planning department proposed that the city place a moratorium on building of any additional two-family dwelling units, duplexes. Historically, the city allowed these housing options in nearly every residential zoning in the city. As I recall, it was made, this was not made to all, as I recall, it was not to make all existing two-family dwelling units non-conforming. The moratorium was issued so that no additional units would be built. Many were originally built as two-family dwellings. Now that the city has proposed a derelict building ordinances, these structures are caught in a position where they cannot be repaired for their original use. They must be entirely rebuilt to single-family dwellings, which is nearly in all cases will be economically unfeasible. Clearly, Mr. Goodwin and the city attorney, Mr. Williams, were doing their jobs by not allowing these non-conforming properties to be repaired and used as two-family dwellings. Many of these again were built as two-family dwellings. We are now faced with this dilemma because of the past elected officials' desires to eliminate this housing option in our community. The goal was to reduce rental in the city by eliminating any further building of two-family dwellings. Has essentially had no effect. The number of rental units that have actually increased since this ordinance was adopted. So now what do we do? As I see it, we have about 3 options at this point. The first option is to leave the two-family dwellings in the derelict state and not allow them to be repaired until they become blighted, and then we tear them down. Incidentally, some of these may be historically significant. Option number 2 is we work with the property owners to find a solution that is economically feasible to rebuild them into single-family units. As a builder, remodeler, developer, I don't think that's possible. And lastly, the third option, as I see it, is we change the ordinance to allow derelict two-family dwellings to be repaired and continue to serve as a safe, healthy housing resource. As a side note, the difficult part as a community planner is to overcome the false narrative that housing is bad for our community. Our past administrations have put in place ordinances and regulations that have effectively eliminated future housing for our city. The bias against housing must be overcome if we are to meet our housing needs in an environmentally sustainable and economically realistic manner. Misperceptions, exaggerations, and unfounded beliefs contaminate civic discussion about housing. Anti-housing resistance can be rationally addressed by providing evidence about housing that is real, not imagined, not imagined impacts. Attitudes about houses aren't solely derived from objective facts, however. Emotions, values, and even peripheral factors such as what everybody else thinks plays important parts in the development of pro-housing and anti-housing attitudes. I will tell you, planning is a very difficult issue, and it's difficult for you all too. As a planner, planners have to look in the future. My constituents are in diapers, and that's how far I think you all have to think. Because as I stand up before you today, you all remember the flood.
That's time, Mr.
I'm gone.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say I want to thank Mr. Towers for his participation on our planning department, and the things he has contributed to our city. I was thinking about Mr. Towers' contribution to our city, and he has brought the Kings and Queens development, as well as all of the high-rise apartments across from Barrett's Landing. So I would contend that he has done more for helping our city grow than many people, particularly probably anybody on our council. And I'd just like to thank him for all he's doing for trying to help our city. And I'd like to go in the record.
Tommy Council.
Thomas Council, 425 Bracy Street. I want to say that I'm in agreement with Mr. Tyler. I support his position. I support everyone who's against this new ordinance. And what I want to do is ask you to take the time and actually look at the impact and determine exactly which areas are going to be impacted the most. I've looked, but I haven't seen maps, or I can't see where it went past the Planning Commission for their input. I can't see where you did the planning or the proper assessments of what's happening. It seems to me that some of the people justifiably are concerned about what it's going to do to the areas with the most historic buildings. These houses give the city character. They should be protected in some way or fashion. Now, is it true that these houses will be more impacted than other areas? If there's a cluster of these buildings, then maybe there are some other ways to finance corrections of the problems. Now, you recently put together a packet that the state went along with to rehabilitate the Madison Street area. I served on the committee, some of the committees that picked that area. And when we talked about it, we were trying to pick areas and put them in some kind of order, most need to lowest needs. Okay, so if we have areas now that are higher needed, that are historic, maybe a rehabilitation grant could help them, maybe not. Maybe there are combinations of some things that could be done. Maybe money could be put together, like with the downtown. Maybe we can get with some of the banks or whatever, and put packages together to help the owners. So if you knock down these buildings, okay, you're going to lose some tax base. We're in a low economic situation. Franklin is a community that tends to come back last in the housing. Housing is just starting to turn around. We tend to be the last to turn around. So what we do is going to sit with us for a while. It's going to hurt that base. Then you had, like with the police department, we need money. Well, we need to be able to pay for things with sources other than the electric department, you know? So take your time, look at the impact, look at exactly what you can do to help the owners get the job done, not just say, okay, we're giving you a couple of incentives and knock your house down. Do we have some protections so that the homeowners can go in and say, hey, we want to appeal this decision? Or is it all just running by the staff? What protections do we have? You know, take your time, put in some protections for the owners, see if you can get some financing packages together, see if it's certain areas that are more impacted than others. Don't move so fast without knowing what you're doing. Send it to the planning commission, send it, you know, and if you need to set up some side committees, do that. Do like you did for rehabilitation project. Put some thought into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we're gonna, before we take any motions and everything, we're gonna have an opportunity. I said, you know, we've heard some feedback at our last meeting. We've heard some feedback tonight. Hopefully, we've done our own homework and see where we are. But before we entertain any motions, let's have some discussion and see where everybody's head is, if that's okay with everybody. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, my thought is, government always likes to have a reach. And I think what we need to do before we go reaching is we need to give the incentive. And let's see what we get out of the incentive before we start putting a stick with it. We can always add a stick later on if we don't get a desired result, but why don't we try putting a carrot out there without a stick, see if we get some response. And if we do, that helps the city. And if we don't, then we can sit back and evaluate at that point. But to just right off the bat, just say we're going to put the punishment in if they don't invest. And the second piece that I think Mr. Tyler was referring to is we have a policy that once it's taken out of use, it reverts back to single family. If we have policies like that that are created an issue, we need to know what they are. So we may need to go back to the plan, where I think we can go back to the Planning Commission, is to have them to review these ordinances that we put into place, for them to come back and say, hey, if you take this off, this would be the result. This may help us get out of this. You know, it may have been appropriate in the when it was put in, but you know, maybe it's worn itself out, and we need to take a look and see if we can put policies in place that will help us grow, not keep us from growing.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with Councilman Burgess in regard to trying to put the incentives without necessarily putting the punishment in place. I want to see our city become more friendly to people who are willing to make investments in our city. And we discussed a situation with a particular landlord last time who wants to do something here, has properties here, has had investments here, and he's not able to do it because of the way the ordinances were adjusted. He had a property that was a duplex originally. We changed the ordinances, and when he purchased the property, he wanted to retain it as a duplex. But the ordinances were preventing him from doing that when it was built as a duplex. So I think when we find ourselves having policies that aren't advantageous for the citizens and the investors, then I don't think, or I should say, an unjust law is not a good law at all. So I would concur with Councilman Burgess.
Okay.
And, Mr. Mayor, I would like to add, the ordinance that we're looking at, as I stated before, the wording, some wording needs to be changed. Some more things need to be rearranged with it. We haven't taken the time to go through it as we should. I don't feel this is the time. From the lending standpoint, it's not a good time to borrow money to fix houses. From the other standpoint, we need to wait for better times. We need to look at situations that will help our citizens from the state and the federal level where they have programs for that. We need to research and find those programs. They have programs for that. But basically, to pass this ordinance now would be a grave, would be a bad thing for the citizens and for the city council. We are the city council. Our staff and the city puts programs together, but it's up to the council members to take a hard look at what we're doing and what we're passing. And I don't think, Mr. Mayor, we've taken that hard look yet. And until we do that, I don't think we can pass this ordinance.
All right, thank you.
I'm totally in agreement with Councilman Burgess and what he said.
I'm willing to listen, but I'm afraid we'll be here 2 years from now, listening. Because I've heard of derelict structures, and this is added on to the program, but I don't think that we have all the information. In other words, I don't think that I think some are getting confused over the language. But I'm willing to wait and see if we can get more information. I'm willing to go along with Councilman Burgess, what he said. That was a good idea. But I'm afraid we're gonna come back with the same old thing. The word is not gonna be right for everybody. And then we back up. We become afraid to act. We know we got a problem and we become afraid to act.
All right.
I can go along with Mr. Burgess on it. I don't believe, though, that it's going to draw much out of the woodwork. I don't think it's going to have people coming and fixing their derelict properties right off the start. The incentive would be there, I just don't think it's going to happen. At the same token, you need to give it a try, I think, before we go to the penalty stage of it, which I think would do nothing more than turn everybody off to even the one or two that may want to try it. I think the Planning Commission probably knows of the grants that you probably are talking about. They can bring that forth. I think that's how Madison Street got started.
Okay.
But I wouldn't mind go ahead and at least putting in the incentive portion of it, as long as the city doesn't go below zero. And the math on it, I would like that language to be put in, that it would not go past the value of the land in order to do it. I realize it's for a 7-year period. I think a lot of people have misunderstood what we're talking about with derelict structures versus the other. Okay. And I think that needs to be clarified so everybody understands it. I've heard a lot of people talking on it, and it's not what I've been reading as a derelict structure.
Okay. Just for clarity for everybody, the Planning Commission has looked at this. The Planning Commission recommended that it be in the comprehensive plan. It was put in the comprehensive plan and was forwarded to us a couple of years ago, and we agreed, council agreed to the comprehensive plan, which include addressing derelict properties. You know, this is one of those things, you know, you look at the statute or as it's written, it came right out of the state book, right out of the state code book, 6.6 did. The 6.7 through 6.10 is the punitive part. And whenever we have something that we want to question or people want to question, they always want to look at the punitive part and not the good part. I kind of agree with Mr. Burgess. If we take out the punitive part, we've got rehabilitation grants. I think we found out last time we've not had anybody to utilize that in a while. Isn't that right, Ms. Rickman? So we have rehabilitation grants that are out there. We have nuisance ordinances out there for properties, which say when properties become unsafe and unhealthy or a health hazard, that something needs to be done to them. As far as derelict properties, I don't think anybody up here wants to see us tear down historic buildings or tear down derelict properties. What we want to see is we want to see those properties improved. Now, I'm all for property rights, but let me tell you, from my perspective, with ownership goes responsibility and accountability. So I would suggest, you know, that we look at it the way Mr. Burgess suggested. Let's put it in without any of the punitive things. Let's see if we can maybe get a hook or two, watch some some of these properties that have been boarded up for years, not just the 6 months we're looking at, but, have been boarded up, and let's see if we can. We can sit here, it's the chicken or the egg. Which is going to come first? The money or somebody fixing it up? You got to have money to fix it up, but you got to have the will to fix it up. So, from my perspective, I would support where Mr. Burgess is coming from by putting it in without the punitive part. And let's see if we can't really rally as a city and come together and address this thing and clean up our city. Let's like, what did somebody say? Let's look like we're somebody, So that's, I would agree. So I would ask at this point in time, what's the pleasure of council?
I didn't really look to see exactly where we would stop it. I don't,
6.7.
we just stop it at 6.7 where it says violations?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to say at this point, that's all good what Mr. Burgess has said, but we don't have anything in writing as to what it's going to be. I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on something.
What do you mean?
A whim, which I don't know what it's going to be.
We've got a copy of it right here. We've had a copy of it now for a couple of months.
But you're talking about 6.7 from the state.
No, 6.7 is on ours. What I'm saying is taking out 6.7. 6.7 to 6.10 is not even in the state statute. It's not in there. It's in ours. What we want to do, I think, is just model what the state has and incentivize people to fix up their properties or to take advantage of incentive opportunities to fix up their properties. I don't know whether they will or whether they won't. We don't have the money to tear down structure. It costs money to raise properties.
Mayor, if I could comment, based on the input that was received at the work session and comments we've received since from some members of council, the city attorney has taken a shot at that and discussed it with myself and the community development director, and he has an example that would do just what you suggested tonight. We didn't know if you were interested in looking at that tonight or just send it out.
I would suggest under the circumstances.
I need to see something before I vote. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
I would suggest that we hold off on doing anything tonight until we get a fresh copy so everybody can look at that fresh copy. And it probably, if you recall, we also had a copy of the nuisance ordinance as well as the rehabilitation grant process that he shared with us months ago. So maybe we ought to do our homework and reread, but that seems to me to be the most viable option at this point in time, and that's what I would suggest we do.
Okay. And again, we can send that out.
And we will put it on the agenda, and everybody will have another 2 weeks to look at it.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good to me.
Is that,
But I do think we need to define exactly what we mean by the derelict properties again, so that everybody understands it.
well, it's
And that
defined,
what-
it's
And that what
defined.
some people think are derelict properties are not fitting in that mold. Just because they have trees going out of the roofs does not necessarily mean they're derelict.
The definition in here is very specific, and I will quote, "It has to be something that has been completed, might endanger public health and safety or welfare, and for a continuous period in excess of 6 months has been 1, vacant, 2, boarded up in accordance with the building code, and 3, not lawfully connected to electrical service from a utility service provider or not lawfully connected to any required water or sewer service from a utility service provider." That's pretty specific.
It's very specific, and I wanted that out there because some people look at houses that are run down and think they're derelict, and that's not what we're
Well, I
looking at.
think what happened when somebody euphemistically said that it's an eyesore. I don't see a word about eyesore in any of this stuff that I've been reading. Matter of fact, I doubt anybody would write an ordinance that would have eyesore in there. But so be it. I think we've got a plan. We will pursue that plan, if that's agreeable with everybody at this point in time.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask that the second part of what I discussed, maybe the city manager, when he comes back, can kind of guide us on how we get back to the planning commission to look at the ordinances that we have, to make them pro-growth rather than punitive or getting in the way.
I agree. I think that's also a good suggestion we need to do.
You don't want that on the same agenda as this? Should be. I don't think we can do that in 2 weeks.
Why not?
I mean, we don't, I don't want to go through and identify the ordinances. I want them to take a look and see.
Well, the
which
Planning
ones.
Commission is currently reviewing several ordinance amendments that speak to some of this, but it's not comprehensive of every ordinance we've got on the books now. The one that was referenced, as I understood it, was adopted years ago. We can give you a copy of that or suggest you look at it in the code, in the current ordinances, but that applies, as I understood it, to all the properties similarly situated within that zoning district, that it's no longer an allowed use for a duplex. So that's a pretty comprehensive view, and that's what I understood and what the city went through many years ago when that was done. But we can give you some background. I'm sure the Community Development Director can put a summary together on that item and share it.
Is all that in writing?
Yes.
Because I've heard, different stories.
Yeah, I mean, the ordinance amendments are the ordinance amendments, and we have that information when it was done back then, and the Community Development Director briefed me on it because I wasn't here. It was a long time ago.
And who will be able to brief us on it? So
Well,
we'll have a-
we can again prepare a report and distribute that on that item. But comprehensively of all the ordinances, that's what I thought I heard you say. That's my only concern. If we can look at that specific issue and give you a report on that.
One of my concerns is any of the things that you read would make you eligible for a derelict property if you met any of those criteria. Is that correct?
No, all of them.
All three.
You have to meet them all.
All three. It's inclusive.
Okay, as long as it's
It's
inclusive.
it's not or.
Okay, that's good.
All right, so we'll prepare a report on that specific item, and then the Community Development Director also can brief you on what the the Planning Commission is currently looking at. We've already done several of those. When we did the comprehensive plan, essentially, that's what we did. We looked at all the regulations and the new practices and so forth and changed some of them, but,
Well, that's why we got mixed use downtown. We used not have
yeah,
that. Was
that,
right.
And it was
upper floor
interesting,
housing,
a
so
couple
some of
years
those
ago-
we've done, but not all of them.
A couple of years ago, I went to a thing with housing. In fact, Beth was there from the planning department as well. And it talked about the young people. They don't want houses with a yard. They're looking for the
They want
duplex.
acreage,
They're
that's
looking
right.
for the apartments. They're looking for the condos. They don't want to have any upkeep. Just let me have my Starbucks and my and my condo.
All right. So we've got a plan forward on that one. Is everybody okay with it? Okay.
Will that be before the next meeting? We're handling all that before
Well,
the
we
next
can
meeting?
report that to you as soon as the Community Development Department can plan
Okay.
something. But in terms of this particular ordinance, as I understood the mayor, just for clarity, the derelict will come back with a redraft for the next agenda for your consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And if I may ask one thing, if it's possible that we can get that draft before the agenda, I would appreciate it.
He's got a copy here,
Okay.
if you want it.
We'll,
get copies that way
we will receive
Not
it.
for the debate tonight.
No,
We
no,
will,
no,
re-
no,
we will
for-
receive it via email tomorrow
Right, for digesting
Okay.
lawyer.
Got paper tonight.
or somehow.
That'll
Okay.
work.
All right. All right. Next on the agenda is the Charter Cable franchise discussion. Mr.
Okay.
Martin, is that you?
My comments will be very limited to what I put in the agenda regarding the history. I'll be glad to answer any questions about that, but the bottom line is our franchise has expired back in 2011, and we've gone through a process, or the city went through a process over the years to try to address this, sometime to no avail due to various things like mergers of the parent company and bankruptcies, several other things have occurred. But for whatever reasons, we now have worked with the county and have been able to negotiate an updated draft that still's got a few minor tweaks that the city attorneys suggested that we'll be sharing with the representatives, but we wanted to get it out tonight, and the bottom line is we would recommend that you schedule a required public hearing on the February 26th regular meeting, which allows sufficient time for any final tweaking and for the public hearing to be advertised. I'll defer to the city attorney, who has also put a brief report in there on the draft itself and what it is and what it is not. I'll defer to him. Further comment.
The original franchise was granted in 1996, and the big item in the 1996 franchise was what was going to be the fee or the tax that the city was going to receive as compensation for granting the franchise. All of that changed when federal and state law changed in 2006 and 2007. The collection of the fees for the franchises were redirected to the state. Then the state takes what they receive and takes a bite out of it and then allocates it back to the locality. So in my opening letter to you, I indicated the big thing back in 1996 was how much income was the city going to receive, and that got taken away from us in terms of being in control of it. So there wasn't really a whole lot of incentive to try to negotiate a new franchise when the old one expired in 2011. And that's a bit of a misnomer, although it did expire in terms of it being a 15-year agreement. They still operated under that franchise because it dealt with the control of the streets and the poles and that sort of thing. And so the new franchise, it really, you almost hate to say it, but it's a little bit of window dressing. It's not a whole lot of substance to it because, once again, the biggest thing that we would hope to control is gone, and that would be the income that you would receive from it. The biggest thing that's left over now, in my estimation, is number one, do we have cable available to all the residents in the city? The answer to that is yes. At one point, we did not have cable out to Pinnacle Agricultural, and we have overcome that issue now, and cable is out at Pinnacle and at Pretlow. The second thing deals with their operation of the cable lines and that sort of thing in the city's right-of-ways, using the city right-of-ways, using the city poles and that sort of thing. We still maintain control over that. They have to be mindful of their responsibility in terms of making changes on the poles, not to disturb any of our lines and that sort of thing. There is a reporting ability. If you have issues with reporting, if you have issues with your cable service, you can file a report with the company. We have the ability to get those reports and look at those reports and make a decision as to whether or not we feel like there is some reoccurring event that we want to talk to the cable company about addressing in terms of their operations. And so that is still in the franchise. And there's one other thing. Senior moment. It's gone. But there is one other thing. I just can't think of it right now.
We'll communicate that at the public hearing.
I'll remember as soon as we get through this meeting. I think that's it.
All right, so Mayor, our recommendation is as stated, that the council schedule that public hearing, and that we will have the governmental liaison who's worked with our Shared Services Committee and with city and county representatives to that. At that hearing, we're going to work with the county to schedule their hearing and ours far enough apart on the respective agendas that he can attend both meetings that night.
I got it. It's cable service to all the city government buildings, and there are 2 PEG channels.
Yeah.
We've got that still. Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, I had one question before we, and that is, maybe Mr. Martin, Mr. Williams can answer that. As I read, if I'm not mistaken, the funds go directly to the state, then the state disperses it back to the local locality,
Right.
correct?
Yes,
What
sir.
is that percentage that is funded back? Do we have any idea?
It's based on what you take, I mean, what the account, the people sign up for, so there's.
It's based on gross receipts of the charter in Franklin, charter organization
Yeah,
in
the actual
Franklin.
customers that use the service.
Okay, so the more
So-
customers.
But the state established that, and the federal law required it to go this way, so as the city attorney pointed out. So we really don't have any
Any
view
say?
of that.
Control.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I think charter service to an individual customer, or individual homeowner seems to be, in my experience, has been really good. But I know we've, as a city, have had trouble with issues. And I don't see, I mean, we can provide a copy to them of something, give them notice, but I don't see any kind of a point of contact. Is there any merit to putting them to require to maintain a point of contact, so when we have issues, we know who to contact?
Well, we have it now, but you're right, it's not codified in the franchise.
Yeah, so if somebody changes or they change an office, then all of a sudden we're out in
You wouldn't
no-no
want to
land
name it,
again.
but we could require that to be something that
Any
they
change
provide.
that they provide?
Okay. Yeah, no, you see a problem? All right.
Because now I think you dial an 800 number and get somebody out in
Yeah,
California.
well,
Yeah,
we've
but
had,
when we have bigger systemic problems,
Yeah.
we need somebody that's gonna know about Franklin and be able to say, yep, we can deal with that.
and that really made a huge difference, because up until the last year or so, we hadn't had that. We had very little success. We were dialing the 800 number.
Well, the service has been pretty good to everybody but those out at the village. The people at the village have had problems and continue to have problems with their TV. It goes out for hours at a time.
Hadn't heard that.
I think you're aware of it as well.
Their own charter, though.
They're on charter, yeah.
We have periodic problems. I think a lot of it's construction and stuff that goes on, and they
So
don't.
it's cutting lines and stuff like that, okay. Well, we'll certainly inquire about that, but if it's something that addresses this, otherwise we can talk to the representative
Right. And
about
the-
it.
And the other thing
and
was
he'll look
in
into
line
it.
with what Mr. Burshoff, what I was gonna say as well, was we have the PEG channels, but can we get them so that they're transmitting loud and well?
Well, in my observation, in my testing of late, it's improved, but it's,
Improved.
until they do digital equipment in their whole system, it's not gonna be, because it's digital to analog.
Yeah, is that
And
gonna be anytime
we now
soon?
have digital. He indicated that's not in the near term.
So this franchise agreement will be up before we get it, probably.
Who knows? I hope not, because sooner or later, analog is going to be so antiquated, they won't be able to use it, and they'll be forced to update. And so I think it's more of a function of their budget and how quickly they can update the whole system, but it's going to take a while.
Ironically, didn't they require all of us to go to digital a couple of years ago?
Oh,
And we-
yes.
You couldn't even get a TV station if you didn't have digital, but
And
yet
it
they
works
don't
with,
have to do
it works
that?
with the boxes, but not with their entirety of their system, like our distribution equipment that we send to them. You're right, they did
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
Have not
They
enforced
come
that
down-
upon
They
themselves.
come down with a big stick, but they certainly don't want to
Well, I
give it on
think
the
some
other
of that was
side.
driven by the federal guidelines too. They were required to do that by the bigger stick.
But however, isn't it going to be obsolete when broadband comes through the area anyway?
Well, it may be from a customer standpoint, but probably not, because it's likely to be a cheaper alternative for individual homeowners. Now, business-wise, it very well could be, because now some companies use other alternatives like Verizon,
Right.
but it's more expensive.
Right.
Verizon.
Well, what I find interesting, the young guys in my office don't even use cable. They got Hulu and
Yeah.
Amazon Fire Stick.
Yeah, that's
and
the reality of cable in general. It's
It's on its way out.
Mr. Mayor, if I can make one more point, something that Councilman Johnson said kind of spurred me. It used to be when you gave a franchise, it was exclusive, and that's no longer the case. The state law changed so that if you read this franchise agreement, it grants a franchise, but it does not preclude another cable company or another competitor from coming into this market and trying to capture the market with better service or, better whistles and bells and that sort of thing. So, from that standpoint, maybe what they need is a little bit of competition. Maybe we need to see if we could get somebody in here to compete against them. The contract does not, the franchise does not prohibit that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good to know.
all right. So you don't need anything from us other
No,
than you just, this is
it's
just.
call the public
okay.
hearing if you consent. I guess a consensus of the council that we schedule that for the February 26th meeting.
Yeah, we don't need a vote on that, do we, Taylor?
No, sir, we'll get it done.
Okay, okay. All right, city manager's report, Mr. Martin.
I won't read this entire report for the sake of time, but because council's had it, but I would reference that we have had communications with representatives of the school board and superintendent's office on a regular basis. We just recently had a meeting. It was productive, in my opinion, and we're going to reach out to the vice chairs to see if they are interested in joining that group. City attorney and I met with the Hayden project officials. You'll be getting more information on that in the near term as they progress, but I believe they're either very close or have already gotten their building permit issued. As of last week, it was imminent, but the architect had to submit some additional changes and documentation, but I think they're very close. They had completed the work on the demolition permit that they already had. The biggest thing right now is trying to finalize utility plans, and I've asked them for some more information on that so that we can discuss the improvements to be made and whether there's any benefits to the neighborhood in general around their property that can be had from any upgrade the city might participate in. This would be similar to the participation we did on South Street a few years back when Love's came to town. We had some deficiencies in fire protection in that area, undersized water lines, so we're looking to see if there's any, because we do have some undersized water lines in and near that school site, specifically Oak Street, and it's going to, the service will be coming from near the water tank coming through by Morton. So we were looking at what benefit it might be to the school if and when the city and the school board appropriate funds to replace the modular units and add to the campus with stick-built structure, permanent structure. There may be some benefit to having a larger water line nearby than is currently available. So we're looking at all of that, and not too distant future, we should hear back from the developer on what they can do and what participation and what portion they've got to have for their project and what else we might want to participate in. And we come to the council for, and share with you the cost of that and so forth and the benefits. All right. I indicated the Verizon Tower lease discussion. City attorneys advised we have to have a public meeting on that as well, since it's a long-term lease. That'll be scheduled in February, as noted in your agenda. We'll have Parks and Rec scheduled to have that report on February 12th, and we've encouraged you to do likewise. We've invited some additional community partners to that meeting. Hopefully they'll be able to come and give you perspective from other stakeholders, like the faith-based community and some of the other agencies that currently provide services to the youth in the community. Particularly Cover 3, I think, has expressed some interest in that, their representation. We're still waiting to hear on the COVA local on our local option on health insurance. Haven't received anything official from them on that.
Any ideas? I mean,
No,
nothing?
nothing official, no. I just, they're being pretty tight-lipped with it at this point, so. Hopefully we'll know soon. And going back to the health insurance discussion earlier, not to debate that again, but obviously we're going to have a lot of discussions about health insurance, and this is one of the key points, what happens with this potential option, if that's available or not, because that dramatically affects and further increases our cost. I also put the council priorities template. I think the consensus in previous discussion was council would schedule some work meeting, a work session type format to come up with the top priorities out of the remaining priorities. I think the mayor said something about 3 or up to 6 or whatever. So we await your direction on that. I hope that was helpful, and I appreciate any feedback I can get. I don't have to get it tonight on the information that was contained. Last couple of items. One, Steve Wampler of Wampler Eanes will be at our, along with the Commissioner of Revenue at the February 26th meeting to update you on the Commissioner of Revenue's office, particularly with regard to the general reassessment for 2018 that's underway and hopefully soon coming to a close. And reminder to anyone who hasn't done it, the deadline for submission, it was misstated at the last meeting for the conflict of interest statements, is February 1st. So be sure you have those in to the city administration. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, anybody have any questions? What I would like for us to do, and I'll ask Mr. Martin to poll council to see when we can have a called meeting to review our priorities list so that we can have a work session and provide some feedback and make sure that we know exactly what we want to be worked on in the next few months, okay? I think, so I'll ask him to poll council and see when's a good time for everybody, okay?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Martin? Okay. Council staff, board and commissions, any reports?
Yeah, the jail met on Wednesday, the 10th of the month. Currently, we're housing 55 inmates that should be in a state facility, but they haven't been picked up for one reason or another. That usually sometimes takes a while, saves them money, but they pay us a little bit more to hold them. That's out of approximately 770 inmates on an average. Franklin's been holding steady at 15% of the population of the jail. It's been that way now for about 3 years. We've held fairly steady at 15%. And the income and the versus expenses is running very well. We're holding our own. We're meeting budget very easily. We have several extra feds. Of course, that just takes a phone call, and we could lose them, as we almost did a couple of years ago. But right now, we're the, I hate to call it the priority jail, but they like using our jail better than almost any of them because we get people on court on time, and we go everything by the book. And if you look at our valuations, we're always coming in with A-plus valuations from all the agencies that come in and inspect us. We do have a new contract with a telephone company. We've told them to go ahead and make the contract. It should be in place now. This is for the inmates. It's going to increase their ability to be in contact with their relatives, especially if their relatives are far away. They'll be almost like Skyping back and forth on that. Of course, that's always monitored, but it'll be Skyping. And they're looking also at the possibility of doing more of that as opposed to a lot full of people, the lobby full of people and stuff, and create some problems there sometimes. We'll also have new mental health services on in the jail. It's better than the one we used to have in that we have somebody on hand and providing health needs or mental health needs to these folks. There was an interesting statistic a while back that approximately 40% of those that are in jail have mental health needs. So what the state is going over now is not a joke. It's a very serious problem that we do have in the jails. And that pretty much took care of the meeting, I think, unless you want to add something. I don't
Yes.
think.
If I may add, Vice Mayor Cheatham pointed it out very well, the visitation part, with staffing, the new visitation will help staffing. There'll be less people, but we'll be using 2 to 3 officers in the lobby just for crowd control. For instance, sometimes visitation can be a problem. If Joe Blow is incarcerated and Mary Sue is the wife and someone is the girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera.
I just didn't want to go there.
You may have a problem. So basically, what we're doing with the visitation, with the new contract is you'll be able to, sort of like Skyping, as he mentioned, view that, a visitation without coming to the jail. And the other part is if individuals want to come to jail, because that is a cost. mind you. If individuals are coming to the jail, and, can't afford the Skyping part, we're going to do the other part free, where they'll still have a way of visitation, but not, it'll sort of still be like Skyping, where you'll have one officer to control that, and the timing on the visitation and so forth. So that's what I want to point out. Individuals will still be able to visit their loved ones if they cannot afford it, and so forth.
And all of this gives the jail an increase in income,
Yes.
a substantial increase in income.
Yeah. Indeed.
Mr. Mayor, we've not had a meeting of the business center, but I have gotten an email on an update. We've had a couple of businesses that were struggling and were not able to pay their rent, so their lease has been terminated, so our occupancy has dropped down to 63%. But the staff is fully aware, and they're working on replacing those businesses with new businesses, and hopefully we'll be back up shortly. I think we have a meeting in February, where maybe we'll have some good news.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Do you have to?
Yes, sir.
The SIPSA man.
If I could talk a second about SIPSA, I wanted to point out that several things will happen at the SIPSA meeting on Wednesday. First, it'll be the first day on the job for Cheryl Ralston. I would like the council to know that I've had the opportunity to meet with her several times and provide her with information and try to bring her up to speed on what are the issues currently before the SIPSA organization. Second, you've heard me talk about the magical date, January 24, 2018. That will be the end of the current use and support agreement, and the new one will go into effect on January 25th, 2018. So that is a rather historical change. With that change, we're hoping that we can offer a lower tipping fee to the localities, which may mean that the city can follow with some reduced expense for the services. Remembering that the tipping fee is not the only part of the expense that shows up on our utility bill. There's also a part in there for the recycles, and there's a part in there for your bulk waste, and there's also the enterprise fund, so that the waste management can be operated as an enterprise fund without borrowing money. So I wouldn't expect it to be a dollar for dollar kind of change in the tipping fee that, in the waste management fee that's charged by the city. But there is going to be some room, I hope, for some reduced fee in that capacity. And y'all protect me from Mr. Martin. He's liable to shoot me for saying that.
It will be a budget topic, that's for sure.
And it's also the first time that all entities involved will be paying their fair share.
That's good.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Wanted to
Thank
bring
you.
that up.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. Okay. Anybody else? Just real quick, we had a business friendly last week. I want to thank Mr. Bly and his department for helping us. We're doing a lighting study for downtown, particularly in the alleyways, to try to provide more secure lights in the back for the downtown merchants, as well as for the overall safety of all of our people that come downtown. So appreciate that work, and hopefully we will reconvene, I think, on February the 7th to look at that and see what other things could be done.
And Mr. Smith Smith Jones was very appreciative of that in the back.
Yeah. I got a message, we put on here that we were going to try to have a closed session to talk with economic development, but she had some things that came up on the property that she's has to investigate more before she comes to us. So I don't know, do we need a closed session tonight?
I don't.
Huh?
I don't-
No urgency.
That was the only thing.
Well, I think,
I think so.
well,
That's the only thing.
if
We talked about some other things, but we don't have to do them tonight.
okay. Well, with that being said, again, Chief, thank you for your report. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We appreciate the input. We appreciate your being here, appreciate your interest in the city. And I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
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 And aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.